In a quiet neighborhood, the story of Jamal Carter unfolded, a tale that left everyone questioning how far deception could go. But what if the truth isn't as clear as we think? Was Jamal the victim or the mastermind behind it all? This is not just a typical crime story. It's a tale of secrets, betrayal, and a life lived in shadows. Stick with us as we unravel the mystery behind Jamal Carter's life and the events that shook an entire community. The story of Jamal Carter begins with an unsettling discovery, a life that, at first glance, seemed ordinary, even mundane. A young man in his mid-30s, Jamal was well known in his small community for his charm, reliability, and seemingly stable lifestyle. But there was much more beneath the surface. Jamal had a history that many didn't know about, a string of questionable decisions and interactions that slowly began to unravel. It was during a routine evening that everything changed. A phone call to the police, a frantic voice on the other end, and suddenly the narrative of Jamal's life took a dark turn. A person had been found, and the events surrounding this discovery were far from ordinary. As the investigation unfolded, Jamal was forced to confront his past, but the deeper law enforcement dug, the more questions emerged about his involvement or lack thereof. What began as a straightforward inquiry slowly morphed into something more sinister. The police unearthed evidence that hinted at a tangled web of deceit, decisions made, people manipulated, and secrets kept in the dark. What makes this case so compelling isn't the crime itself but the layers of manipulation. Who could trust the story Jamal was telling, and who was playing their part in the larger narrative? Was Jamal a victim of circumstances, or had he masterminded the entire sequence of events that led to this moment? As the investigation continues, there are chilling revelations about the people closest to him. Friends, family, and business associates all seem to be involved in a complex game of loyalty and betrayal. What did Jamal truly know, and who was pulling the strings from behind the scenes? A breakthrough finally comes when a hidden letter is found, cryptic yet revealing. But the real bombshell is the surveillance footage that emerges, showing Jamal in places no one expected him to be, with people no one knew he was involved with. The final piece of evidence might just be the one thing that turns the entire case on its head. We may never fully know. This is the eerie story of Jamal Carter, and while the investigation might have concluded, the real question still remains: can we ever truly know the people around us? Could we be deceived so thoroughly, or are we simply blind to what lies just beneath the surface? Jamal Carter, on the surface, he was like any other young man in his early 30s, living in the quiet town of Greenbriar. A place where people smiled and waved on their daily walks, where everyone knew everyone else's business, or so it seemed. Jamal had earned a reputation as a reliable and likable figure. He worked at a local car dealer. To most, Jamal was just another friendly face in town, someone you could count on. Yet, as with all small towns, there were shadows lurking behind the pristine image. The kind of shadows that only came into focus when something tragic happened, something that shattered the illusion of safety that the town had long held. On the night of June 12, 2022, Jamal found himself involved in a situation that would change everything. What began as a seemingly normal evening, a quick stop at a friend's house to pick up a forgotten wallet, spiraled into something far more disturbing. By the end of the night, a man lay dead, and Jamal was at the center of an investigation that would turn his life and the town upside down. The incident that sparked the investigation was brief but shocking. The body of a local businessman, Derek Matthews, was discovered in his home, with signs of a violent struggle. But it wasn't the murder itself that raised questions, it was the circumstances surrounding it. Derek Matthews had been someone Jamal knew well, an acquaintance, perhaps a former mentor, who had helped him with business advice over the years. So why had Jamal been seen leaving Derek's home in the dead of night? And why hadn't anyone heard from him since? At first, Jamal's behavior seemed like an unfortunate coincidence. But the more the investigation unfolded, the more the town began to realize that things were not as they appeared. Behind the quiet exterior, Jamal had been hiding a web of secrets, and the threads began to unravel faster than anyone could have imagined. Jamal's life up to this point had seemed relatively unremarkable, at least on the surface. He'd grown up in Greenbriar, a town where everyone knew each other's family history, where secrets were hard to keep. His father, Robert Carter, was a local mechanic who had a reputation for being hard-nosed but fair. Jamal's mother, Erica, was a school teacher respected by the community and known for her no-nonsense attitude. Jamal's upbringing was solid, the kind that set expectations high. He was supposed to follow in his father's footsteps and take over the mechanic shop when the time came, but Jamal had other plans. He left for a brief stint in college, returning a few years later with grand ideas of making something of himself beyond his father's shadow. He started working at the car dealership, climbing the ladder quickly, gaining friends along the way. But with that rise came a subtle arrogance, a desire to be more than just the kid from a small town. To his friends, Jamal was a dependable and charismatic guy. Leela, his girlfriend of 2 years, believed in him completely. Their relationship seemed picture perfect, but there were signs of tension beneath the surface. Jamal had grown distant over time. He spent more nights out, leaving Leela wondering about his true intentions. Conversations with friends about his future ambitions hinted at a restlessness, a feeling that his small-town life was too limiting. What most people didn't know was that Jamal had been struggling with some financial troubles that he'd kept hidden. The dealership he worked for had been in trouble, and rumors about his involvement in shady business dealings started to surface. The discovery of Derek Matthews' body was only the beginning of a chilling unraveling. On the night of June 12th, when the police responded to a distress call from an anonymous source, they arrived to find Derek dead, his body showing clear signs of a violent struggle. He had been beaten severely, his once immaculate home now a crime scene filled with overturned furniture and shattered glass. What struck the officers as odd was the lack of immediate leads. No signs of forced entry, no obvious motive. Jamal Carter was one of the last people seen near the crime scene. The night before the murder, Jamal had been spotted leaving Derek's house, but when questioned, he claimed to have left early and had nothing to do with the crime. Initially, Jamal wasn't seen as a prime suspect. After all, he had been a well-liked member of the community, with no prior criminal record. However, his alibi was shaky, and the timing of his departure from Derek's house seemed off. At first, law enforcement believed it could be a robbery gone wrong, a theory that quickly crumbled when it was discovered that nothing of value had been stolen. The idea of a random attack was dismissed, leaving more questions than answers. The detectives, led by Detective Sarah Williams, found themselves stumped. Jamal had become a person of interest, but with no hard evidence linking him to the crime, the investigation ground to a halt. Jamal's behavior only added to the mystery. He cooperated with the investigation but appeared increasingly tense, and his answers often seemed rehearsed. It didn't help that he had avoided speaking to anyone from the local media, only adding fuel to the rumors that he might have known more than he was letting on. But with his connections to Derek Matthews, a man who had his own dubious reputation, many wondered if Jamal was hiding something more dangerous. A breakthrough came when the police analyzed security footage from cameras around Derek Matthews' neighborhood. The footage was grainy but showed Jamal's car parked near Derek's house for several hours on the night of the murder. However, it didn't reveal much else. No one was seen entering or leaving Derek's house except Jamal. Detective Williams pushed forward, reviewing Jamal's phone records, which yielded another disturbing lead. Jamal had made several phone calls to Derek's business associates and had sent cryptic text messages in the days leading up to the murder. One such message read, "We're getting closer. It has to happen soon." To whom was Jamal referring? What exactly did it mean? These messages raised more questions than they answered, but they weren't conclusive enough to point to a motive. A further examination of Jamal's bank accounts revealed several large, unexplained withdrawals, one made just days before Derek's death. Was this connected to the murder? It seemed like Jamal was scrambling to cover his tracks, but the investigators couldn't understand why someone who had no obvious reason to kill would go to such lengths to hide his financial moves. What had Jamal been involved in that had caused him to resort to such secrecy? As days passed, the trail began to run cold. No one could figure out what Jamal's true involvement was. Despite the mounting evidence, no one could confirm whether he had been a willing participant or just another pawn in a much larger, more dangerous game. Just when the investigation seemed to hit another dead end, the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for came when a cryptic message appeared on Jamal's phone. It was sent in the early hours of the morning, just hours before Derek Matthews was found dead. The message was brief, with no sender identified. "It's done. Now we wait." The haunting question lingered: was Jamal a victim, or was he the mastermind behind a crime that could tear the community apart? The investigation was far from over. Every new lead felt like a step closer to an answer, yet each time the truth seemed near, it slipped further away. As the investigation continued, more pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, but the picture was still far from clear. What the detectives and the community had thought was a simple, tragic crime began to look more like the culmination of a much deeper and darker plan. The breakthrough came when investigators unearthed Jamal Carter's personal diary, an unexpected and chilling find. The diary, hidden deep in a drawer at Jamal's home, was filled with disturbing entries that gave a different perspective on the case. Jamal had kept meticulous notes, documenting his frustrations, desires, and, most shockingly, his growing animosity toward Derek Matthews. The entries from the past 6 months revealed a pattern of obsession, manipulation, and a calculated attempt to control the situation. One entry stood out above all the others: "It's all falling into place now. Derek doesn't know it yet, but he's part of the plan. If everything goes as planned, I'll be free of this town and free of him. It's the only way." This single passage caused a seismic shift in the investigation. Was Jamal the victim of an unfortunate circumstance, or had he orchestrated Derek's death all along? The realization that Jamal had been planning something far more sinister than anyone had imagined sent shockwaves through the investigation. As Jamal's manipulations began to come into focus, the emotional toll on those closest to him became undeniable. His mother, Marissa Carter, was devastated when the truth began to emerge. She had always believed her son was misunderstood, a young man struggling with the hardships of life in a small. She had seen his frustrations, but never in her worst nightmares did she imagine he was capable of such violence. In an emotional interview, Marissa described Jamal as someone who had always been charming but troubled, a man who could easily deceive anyone who didn't look too closely. "I didn't know. I really didn't know," she said, her voice cracking. "He told me he was done with Derek, that it was over, but I had no idea it meant something so dark." But perhaps the most shocking twist of all was the discovery of a hidden audio recording found on Jamal's phone. The recording was made on the night Derek was killed. In it, Jamal could be heard speaking to someone, his voice calm and calculating. "It's done. He won't be a problem anymore. The money will be ours, and we can finally leave. I'll handle the rest." The identity of the person on the other end of the phone call was never confirmed, but the implication was clear: Jamal was not acting alone. This wasn't just a crime of passion, it was a well-orchestrated plot involving multiple people. Jamal had pulled the strings, and now, the full extent of his involvement was coming to light. As the investigation into Jamal Carter's involvement in Derek Matthews' death reached its conclusion, the community was left shaken by the unsettling truth. Jamal was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The diary entries, the audio recording, and his calculated actions in the days leading up to Derek's death painted a damning picture. In court, it was revealed that Jamal had not acted alone, but the investigation into his potential accomplices continued. In a public statement, Detective Sarah Williams emphasized that Jamal had manipulated those around him, using his charm and seemingly good nature to cover up his darker intentions. But as the trial progressed, many still couldn't reconcile the man they thought they knew with the cold, calculating individual who had planned and executed a brutal crime. Despite the conviction, the case remained clouded with lingering questions. What pushed Jamal to go to such lengths? Could his manipulation of Derek and others have been a product of his environment, his need to escape, or something more deeply rooted in his personality? As Jamal was sentenced to life in prison, the community found itself divided. Some viewed him as a victim of circumstances, while others saw him as a calculated villain who betrayed those who had tried to help him. But there was no closure for everyone involved. Derek's family, especially his younger sister, expressed an overwhelming sense of grief and betrayal. They had never suspected Jamal, and the revelation that he had orchestrated Derek's death left them with a deep, unshakable sense of loss. They had known Jamal as a friend of Derek's, a person they had welcomed into their home, never imagining he would be the one to tear their lives apart. What do you think happened to Jamal Carter? Was he the mastermind behind it all, or was he just another victim of fate, manipulated by forces beyond his control? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and share this video with others who might be intrigued by this twisted tale. Also, stay tuned for the next episode, where we explore even more dark and chilling stories that challenge our perceptions of justice and humanity.